right, boys, today we're going to be reviewing the 9950X. Now, this video is a bit late because just as I was about to release my numbers, there was that whole controversy from the usual source where they were claiming up to 35% performance boost from a Windows update. Now, the numbers that I've already been getting out of the 9950X were already hella impressive, but I had to double check all my numbers because just in case there was more performance in the tank. And it ended up being complete misinformation. I checked every single game with the new Windows. The FPS was the exact same. So I don't know what those guys are smoking over there, but I want some of that good stuff. For anyone to actually think you can get 35% performance boost out of a Windows update, you gotta be out of your mind. Anyway, moving on, I tested every single Windows version under the sun already with this CPU, so I already know how it performs best. Now, just as I said in that last video, the architecture of Zen 5, the actual architecture itself, is hella impressive. I would take this CPU over any 3D chip currently on the market, and you'll find out why at the end of the video. Now, you guys already know about the dual CCD scam, where the second CCD on the CPU is purposely binned lower, so that AMD can basically get rid of junk silicon to the consumer. But you know where else they cheaped out? The box. Look at this thing. What is this? I paid $650 for this dinky ass little box, man. When I buy a premium product, I was expecting something like this. Like the 7800X3D box is slick. This is like not even cardboard. It's like paper garbage. It's so bad, man. Like, AMD, stop cutting corners. Give me a nice box. What the hell is this? $650. $650. Anyway, you guys know me. I love my premium boxes, and this is the furthest thing from a premium box. Now, in this video, we're going to focus on gaming benchmarks because the video just would have been too long if I included single PC streaming plus workstation plus encoding plus all that extra stuff. It would have just been too long. So make sure you subscribe if you are interested into seeing how this CPU performs in workstation tasks. So like I said in that last video, I tested every single version of Windows. I tested every single method of overclocking this thing. I tested every single gear ratio of memory. You name it, I tested it on how to get this thing to perform, and I think you will be pleasantly surprised with the performance of this thing. I don't think anyone on the internet has extracted more performance out of this CPU than these benchmarks that you're about to see. Now, if you are interested in learning how to overclock this CPU, or any CPU/platform for that matter, I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce you guys to a digital product that I'm working on, a PC optimization masterclass. This course that I'm working on is a step-by-step guide on how to get your PC running its absolute best, regardless of platform, regardless of game. It's not finished yet. It's almost done though, but I have put it up for pre-order in the link down below. Click on that link below. You will get to see all the modules that are included in the course. Right now it's $50 off, and you get access to the Discord included in the price. When the course officially launches, it will no longer include the Discord access, and it will be $50 more expensive. You will be an overclocking master and PC optimization god when you finish that course. So go check out the links below. The course is for people that have no interest in the community vibe whatsoever. They just want to learn how to overclock the damn PC and get back to gaming. But if you are more interested in a more community type of vibe where we talk about hardware, fitness, what have you, head on over to framechasers.org, become a supporter, get access to the Discord, where all information is curated and filtered to have zero misinformation, such as getting 35% performance boost out of a Windows update. Now, just to preface right before the benchmarks, the 7800X3D and the 14900KS are both direct die cooled. This was just cooled on a custom loop. Keep that in mind in the benchmarks. This thing is up against two direct die cooled CPUs, and this thing has a stock IHS, but it runs so efficiently, it still runs so cool. So with that out of the way, let's go see what Zen 5 can do. Okay, so for this video, I'm not going to do bar graphs. I'm actually just going to post the end result of all the benchmarks. It doesn't look as fancy, but at least this way, nobody can say that I faked any numbers. But we're going to start with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Why am I still benchmarking this game? Because it is still one of the best games that scales with literally every type of architecture and every type of core. You can just think of this as like a synthetic Firestrike type of benchmark. So as you can see, the 9950X actually beats the 14900KS here at 6 gigahertz all core, which is super impressive. But the caveat here being is that these benchmarks were done at 1080p low settings with an overclocked 4090, right? So if you were actually playing this game at any normal sane person resolution and settings, then they would all have the exact same FPS and 1% lows because it would be GPU bound. Alright, Assassin's Creed Mirage is up next, and the 14900KS is about 7% faster than the other two AMD CPUs in the 0.1% lows. Once again, though, this was benchmarked at 1080p low. If you actually use 1080p high, I don't know why you would with the 4090, 1440p, 4K, etc., all three of these CPUs would perform identically. But let's assume you have like a RTX 9090 or some shit. Well, the two AMD CPUs actually perform within margin of error of each other. So that 9950X is matching a 7800X3D. A non-3D chip has the same FPS as a 3D chip. So that's how far AMD's Zen 5 architecture has actually come. Okay, Rift Breaker is up next, and the Intel CPU destroys the other two. But there's a very important thing we have to look at here. If you look at the average FPS of the 7800X3D, it shows 278 FPS, whereas the 9950X shows 266. So the 7800X3D here has 5% more FPS in the average. Now look at the lows and the 0.1% lows. Now this is exactly why I despise 3D chips with a passion. This is why I always recommended the Intel CPUs over the 3D AMD ones. But now AMD has shown themselves up with another architecture over their own 3D architecture. The AMD 3D CPUs have a really bad habit of having very, very, very high peak and average FPS numbers with absolute dogshit low numbers, which makes for a terrible gaming experience. So on paper, even though the 7800X3D is quote-unquote 5% faster than a 9950X, your motion clarity and your frame pacing is going to be far superior in this game with a 9950X. Forza is up next, and yeah, here we go. So the 3D chip is complete utter destruction of the other two. A whopping 48% faster than a 14900KS. But in fact, also, the 9950X has about 40 FPS more than a 14900KS as well. It's almost as if I did a Windows update on that 7800X3D. Now, once again, this was benchmarked at like 1080p medium or some shit, hitting over 600 FPS. It's like what are we even doing here? I mean, it's cool to look at from a scientific, theoretical standpoint, but once again, you're not going to have a monitor with a high enough refresh rate to actually make use of any of these CPUs, right? So it doesn't really matter. Then, let's say you actually had that 1440p 480 hertz monitor or whatever, and you were running at a 1080p just to make use of the refresh rate. Would your eyes even be able to see a difference? So now we're entering human bottleneck territory. Far Cry 6 is up next. Now, all three of these CPUs do very well here, but we're going to be paying attention to those minimums. Now, the Intel CPU has about 13% lead over a 9950X and about 8% lead over a 7800X3D. But once again, that AMD 3D CPU actually has the highest averages, right? But it has lower lows than the Intel CPU. So that 3D cache issue is rearing its head once again. So whenever you see first-party benchmark slides from AMD and they don't show the lows, that's why. Because the 3D chip just excels so well at the averages. Okay, Company of Heroes is up next. This is another RTS style title, so it's going to favor the Intel architecture. So the 14900KS here has about 19% lead in the 1% lows over the other two CPUs. But the more interesting thing here is the 7800X3D and the 9950X are basically both identical and within margin of error of each other. The 7800X3Ds got maybe like 2% better in the 1% lows, but otherwise they're exactly the same. So once again, that 9950X without 3D cache is matching a 7800X3D direct die with 3D cache. It's insanely impressive. So you're starting to see now that all of those mainstream benchmarks out there showing the 7800X3D with like 20% better performance over a 9950X, that's all out of the box. Once all of these CPUs are max tuned, the 9950X really gets an opportunity to stretch its legs. Okay, Civilization 6 AI benchmark is up next. Now, this was the strongest showing for the 9950X so far. And the reason why is because this game doesn't care about cache size. It cares only about IPC and clock speed. So what you actually see here is the 9950X is tied with a 6 gigahertz direct die 14900KS. So this is what I was saying with the actual Zen 5 architecture itself being insanely impressive, and it's a far, far larger jump than it was from Zen 3 to Zen 4. Like look at that. It's actually matching Raptor Lake IPC and clock speed. AMD made a massive jump here. So when the 9800X3D comes out, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. All right, Warzone is up next. Now we're going to start off by just running down this dirt road here. And you can see that the 9950X is only about 5 to 7% slower than the other two CPUs. The 14900KS and the 7800X3D are basically identical and within margin of error on both CPUs. Now the resolution here is 1440p. Low settings, and all three of the CPUs are actually well above 90% GPU usage on that 4090. So this is the conundrum that I was talking about in that other video, where if you look at the 9950X, you could probably just give up that 20 FPS and have the best workstation chip out of the three, right? Like, there's definitely a place in the market for this CPU. So you're 5% slower than the other two CPUs, but you get 16 P cores for Windows workstation tasks. No E-core bullshit. So next we're going to do some dip testing here by whipping our mouse around and then checking the lows. Now you also have to keep in mind, guys, that not every single run in this Warzone game is going to be exactly the same, depending on where the plane is and where the players are, etc. It's just kind of like a rough estimate of the performance. But one thing I want you to pay attention to is the lows on the 9950X fluctuate a lot less than the 7800X3D. And then the lows on the Intel platform, the 14900KS, basically don't move at all. It's a complete flat line, which is going to give you the best gaming experience in esport titles, right? You want a flat line for your frame pacing. Don't forget, at the beginning of the video, I did mention that the 14900KS and the 7800X3D are both direct die cooled, while the 9950X is a stock IHS. So I might be able to even close that gap even further, that 5 to 7%, if I direct die cooled the 9950X. So at the top of the signpost here, the 14900KS has about 10 more FPS in the lows, so the victory does go to the Intel platform. And then the 9950X and 7800X3D look to be basically identical in the lows, with the 7800X3D having higher averages. So if you notice, this architecture, or I should say this CPU specifically, the 9950X, seems to be much less susceptible to the dip than Ryzen 7000. But honestly, I couldn't tell you why. I have no idea. Like, theoretically speaking, the fabric speeds are the same and they're still using chiplets, what have you. But like, let me tell you, the Windows experience is way snappier. There's no weird judder. Like, I didn't have any gaming problems whatsoever. Like, I don't know, man. All I'm saying is this thing is way better than Ryzen 7000, including the 3D chips. Let me be clear when I make a statement like that. What I mean is the overall experience. When you're actually in the game itself, yeah, the 3D chip is a better CPU still. I've been saying that for the last year. Once you're actually in the game, the 3D chip is fine, but man, the experience is just absolute dog shit on this CPU. But in terms of like the CPU tier list as a whole, nothing has really changed. For esports specifically, you're still going to want a 14900K. The 3D chip does work the best in racing sims. And then the 9950X lags in esports, kind of trades blows here and there in single player titles. And here, let me say one more thing. In single player titles, I'm benchmarking some of these games in 1080p and 480p and shit. Honestly, guys, we don't need new CPUs in general. I said this before in my 12900K 2024 video. Anything from like a 12600K, 10900K and up, the gaming experience is not that much different, man. We're severely GPU bound. We're going to have to revisit all these CPUs when the 5090 comes out. As of right now, I would ignore all benchmarks and buy the CPU based on your skill level. What I mean by that is if you have no knowledge of overclocking or tuning whatsoever, 7800X3D is going to be your boy because it doesn't need to do anything with that one. If you have a little bit of knowledge in overclocking, the 9950X might be your boy because this thing is significantly easier to tune than the Intel platforms if you know what you're doing. But when it comes to the Intel platform, it still is the fastest if you direct die, delid, water cool your memory, 8,000 megahertz, that shit. Tertiary timings, like when you go balls deep like that, sure, that platform is still the fastest. Also requiring by far the most knowledge to extract all the performance from that platform too. So this is by far my favorite CPU that AMD has ever released now. But it's just not worth $650 though. The price premium is way too damn high, especially when you can just get secondhand 13900Ks off Amazon, like from the Amazon warehouse, for around $300 now. So for half the price, you're still getting more FPS than this thing. So it's a hard sell, but where we really need to test it out is workstation, single PC streaming, encoding, all that type of stuff. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that in the next video. So everyone was wrong about the 9950X. It's literally within 5% of a direct die 7800X3D. That is a massive performance increase over Zen 4. From what I've seen about the Zen 5 architecture, when the 9800X3D comes out, I'm pretty sure that's going to destroy everything. Anyway, guys, I hope you learned something. But if you didn't learn anything, make sure to go pre-order that PC Masterclass, where you can bypass all the BS from Reddit and forums and all the misinformation and just get those answers on how to overclock your PC. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Talk to you later.